What we're doing here is March 5th, 2019, 250, and we are covering early real ear, finishing up that unit on early real ear. Last time we stuck mainly to the PowerPoint slides. Today I think I'm going to stick more to the notes and just make sure we've got our butts covered regarding the notes. So I'll share screen here, and we'll go to the good old notes. There we are, early real ear, and we'll start reading this stuff, and we'll kind of just read from the top, and then we'll flip into the PowerPoints here and there. So prior to real ear measures, also known as probe tube measures, real ear came out in the late 1980s. Functional gain, sound field testing. Yep, they had the hearing test first under headphones and then aided test in a sound field, usually with one hearing aid because people didn't believe in binaural fittings in those days. Oh, and just by the way, kind of interesting, guess who showed? I was yesterday presenting at Western Canadian Symposium, which is a large conference of mainly the two big provinces of Alberta and British Columbia in Canada. And the guy speaking before me was Gus Mueller. So he wrote textbooks on real ear measurement, and so I got to talk with him and shoot the breeze with him afterwards, and it was interesting. I'm going to give you some of his feedback on real ear to coupler difference next time when we meet and when we discuss more today's real ear and stuff like that. But he was really describing too how, you know how you get the fitting method of NAL2, and he says Bernofan's use of NAL2, Oticon's use of NAL2, Unitron's use of NAL2, they all differ. They all buy NAL2 and then they change it for themselves. So the only place you can truly find the NAL2 or DSL5 fitting method that's unadulterated is on the real ear systems. But when you're looking among manufacturers, they all tweak and twist it somehow. They all buy it, and they tend to roll off the high frequencies. So NAL2, as found on Starkey or whatever hearing aid company, is not necessarily the NAL2 that's on your real ear systems. Just as a point of interest, and I don't mind mentioning that here at this stage because we'll certainly be covering that again. There's an excellent article in the Hearing Review written by Sanders, Studi, Mueller, and a few other people, and it describes how 5 hearing aid manufacturers fail the NAL2 test. And it's really an interesting study. We'll be covering that in a later Zoom session near the end of the semester, but okay, well, that wasted a few minutes. No big deal. All right, let's go back to share screen. All right. So you can't test a hearing aid you can't test hearing with hearing aids on under headphones. So the client was tested in a sound field with a hearing aid on. The stimulus was warble tones. And you should know the reason why they used warble tones. It was to get rid of reverberation in the sound booth. That's why sound field testing always uses warble tones. Wee, 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 instead of eh. Calibration is always done for the headphones and also for the speakers, and so they were still putting out the same intensity, like 60 dBHL at 1,000 hertz under headphones was equivalent to 60 dBHL from the speakers, as long as you were within 1 meter of the speaker. So it ensured equivalence between the headphones and the sound field test results, but still the question kept coming up, do I need to plug the client's other unaided ear? Anyway, aided thresholds in a sound field were simply compared to unaided thresholds under headphones, and as we saw, the audiograms had little A's on them. And generally, the little letter A's were about halfway between 0 dBHL and the person's thresholds. And of course, we know why that's the case. It was the half gain rule. So if you provided half gain, then aided speech inputs would sit nicely, I should say aided speech outputs, would sit nicely inside the client's residual dynamic range. Okay, well, general real ear principles emerged, of course, with real ear, and in contrast to functional gain, the real ear was quick and non-behavioral and a physical way to see if the hearing aid is hitting target. No one has a 2 cc volume ear canal. Recall, the actual real ear canal is less than 2 cc's volume. So here's one that a lot of people get wrong on quizzes and tests. 2 cc couplers underestimate the sound pressure level from the hearing aid that actually is taking place in an ear canal. A lot of people get that one wrong, true or false, or I'll say circle 1. Yeah, the 2 cc coupler, circle 1, overestimates, underestimates. And so many people say overestimates, and it's actually wrong, because if the ear canal, if you have a larger space, then your SPL goes down. The smaller the space, the higher the SPL. Basically, ear canal resonance peak at 2700 hertz is slightly different from a 2 cc coupler response as well. Anyway, Real Ear gave an immediate feedback so you could modify the hearing aid fitting on the spot, and that was important. Think about it. When you did functional gain and you weren't hitting your little letter A's, and then you're going, oh shoot, and so you tweak the hearing aid a little bit, and then you got to remeasure the person's thresholds again, and then see if you're at your target there. Talk about taking forever. When you have a tube in the ear canal and your real ear insertion gain isn't quite hitting the target, you can tweak things a bit on the hearing aid and immediately run the curve again. It's so much faster. Anyway, sharing screen. Probe tube measures, also known as real ear, because you are measuring the sound of the ear in some particular individual. Real ear's been around for about 30 years. But the old real ear has been used for years and years. The new real ear, called speech mapping, has only been used mainly in the last 10 years. Before that, it was REUR, REAR, and real ear insertion gain. As we know last week, there's 2 mics, the reference mic and the probe mic. It's important for people who don't do real ear to look closely at your PowerPoints and make sure that you can outline exactly where and what those pieces are. The probe mic and the reference mic. The probe mic being right here, the reference mic being on the black box. And knowing what the roles of the probe mic are and what the role of the reference mic is. The reference mic is mainly there to ensure that the hearing aid system is doing what you want it to do. So making this larger, the sound from the speakers is actually going to get softer if you move closer. If you set the sound from the speakers to be 60 dB SPL, then by gum, what you want to measure at the ear is you want that to be 60 dB SPL. So the reference mic is making sure that the speakers are behaving. The probe mic is actually measuring what's taking place at your ear canal. All right, we know that, but I mean, yeah, that Sam fella knows that, but lots of other people in the class are not doing real ear on a regular basis. And right now, Sam's the only one attending, so Sam's probably pretty well bored, but that's okay. He's got patience and he'll put up with me. So, cool. A survey taken recently in the good old USA revealed only about 60% of audiologists use real ear. And if it's 60% of audiologists, it's likely even more than 60% or less than 60% of HISs are using it. Fitting software only gives a very general idea based on averages. Here's something else. Manufacturer software measurements are not done in real time. Okay? When they're doing measurements, they're doing this. The audiogram. Okay, plus the fitting method, so using its rules as to what kind of gain and output, plus the mic location effect. Is it CIC? Is it RIC? Where's the mic? Is it benefiting from the resonance of the concha? Plus the real ear to coupler difference, plus blah 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 blah. Whereas when you're testing a hearing aid in real ear, all of those things are happening in real time. So a manufacturer's software is sort of like Christmas lights. You're doing this light plus this light plus this light. They have to, because they're predicting and they're adding, like with little plus signs, the various factors in order to come up with what they think that where the aided outputs will be. But in all actual truth, with real ear, you're measuring in real time, and all of those things are interacting, which is why you get a much more realistic picture. That's why I say manufacturer software shows an additive effects of various things, but doesn't show things in real time. How can it? Software might indicate that you're right on target, but real ear verification will show that you are often way off and usually well below where you should be. One of the main reasons why manufacturers roll off highs is to get rid of excessive feedback. They also want initial client comfort. They want you to make the sale. And they tend to underfit. Almost all proprietary fitting methods roll off the highs in a disgusting manner. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Even when they borrow NAL 2 or DSL-5, they still roll. You know what's happening? And Gus Mueller told me this the other day, or just, yeah, yesterday. He said, because I said to him, why do people change NAL if they're paying now to be able to use a patented fitting method? A, why do they change it? And B, are they allowed to change it? I mean, if you're buying, you know, a patented fitting method like DSL, I'm amazed that you're allowed to change anything of it. And he said, actually, there are no rules on that. When in the contracts, the fitting methods often don't stipulate that you may not change it. And sometimes, even though they have, the manufacturer still does change it. They change it for this reason, because they want to ensure better success. So they might have the HIS or audiologist who really believes in NAL 2 or really believes in DSL-5. And then that guy's using those fitting methods. He's not using the proprietary fitting methods. He's fitting Phonak, and he's using NAL 2. But he's not having much success. He's having way more success with Starkey when he fits NAL 2. And I guess I'm going to switch to Starkey. And that's why they do it. They do it to make the fitting more successful and easier, without feedback, with less client discomfort. And then they'll believe, yeah, this guy's version of NAL, this guy's NAL 2. I don't know, when I use NAL 2 on Oticon, I get way better results than when I use NAL 2 on Phonak. And it's because Oticon did something to NAL 2 that Phonak didn't do. Maybe Phonak left NAL 2 more originally as it was meant to be. So there's a lot of shady things going on behind the scenes, and you have to do real ear to find out what you're really getting. I always say it's like a doctor saying, I think you got cancer, without asking for a biopsy. If you're not going to find out what's really there, you really don't know. You really don't know. The manufacturer's software only predicts. And many times someone has bought a pair of $6,000 hearing aids and is getting about $6 worth of benefit from it, because they might be getting 2 or 3 dB of gain when they should be getting 20 to 30. And it's it's amazing how many studies have shown this to be true, even with client satisfaction. Client satisfaction with hearing aids is higher when real ear is used than when it isn't used. So it is definitely a preferred practice. And yet there are so many practitioners out there that aren't using real ear. Unreal, but it's true. All right. Okay. Software might indicate that you're on target, but real ear verification may show that you're way off, usually below where you should be. Here, the danger is that today's hearing aids are quite complex. So the complexity of the software makes it seem like they've accounted for everything. And today's software has become very psychosocially focused. This is the line I always use. If you have trouble hearing the preacher every second Sunday at a 33-degree angle at 45 feet, push this button. We often don't have a good idea as to exactly what happened. We believe the software has done its job, but it's almost always underfitting, and our job is to be a physiotherapist of the ear. We got to get the client to gradually accept appropriate hearing aid amplification. At first, it is baby steps. Yep, the non-experienced hearing aid wearer, you shouldn't be hitting target. You should be deliberately underfitting. And then you can write in the file, deliberately underfit. Next session, increase gain and output. So manufacturers tend to roll off high frequencies to reduce feedback, etc. Sometimes they make their own adjustments to fitting methods. And the blame can be put on anywhere, but really the onus is on the clinician to verify with real ear. After all, the manufacturers aren't doing the fitting. They're just supplying you with the material. And if we just buy what they've told us, well, that's not really their fault. Whoops, holy smokes, that went like the speed of light. I don't know where the hell that went. Okay, move back. Where the heck were we? Oh, there we go. So probe tube mic equipment or components, obviously the probe mic. This probe mic and that little box, this guy here, I'll show you which one. This guy here is the weak link in the system. In all real ear systems, this is your weak link. If this is screwed up, your whole thing is screwed up. And if this box gets any wax in it, you have to buy a new one. And there's a lot of people that wash or reuse probe tubes. A lot of people do, because probe tubes cost about $1.50 each. And sometimes people think, oh, shoot, I might run out of them, you know. Same with insert headphones. I've seen people taking insert headphones and placing them in the liquid. Once the liquid gets in the sponge, you can't get it out of the sponge. Sponges have thousands of little holes in them. The best way is to replace, because when you replace, that's the ultimate in sterilization. I mean, that is as good as sterilization. You are using a new one. But human nature being what it is, people like to play it safe and reuse the tubes. I've done it, so I'll admit I've done it before. And when you do, all you're doing is taking any wax that may have been at the end of the tube and you're warming it up with friction, and you're lining the entire inner side of the tube with a thin film of wax. Then you're putting it back on top of the probe tube thing on the box, and the wax now gets inside of the box. Now you will be paying $150, okay, instead of $1.50, because you got to get a new probe mic assembly. So the probe mic assembly is the weakest link in the system. The speaker never gives out. The monitor isn't giving out. What is going to give out is that little guy. So people have to be very aware of what it consists of. Be very careful with this little puppy here. Okay, to the notes. So the probe mic and the reference mic are on the mic assembly. The reference mic is near the probe mic, but it's outside of the ear canal. It's near the ear, of course. It's on the little box. It picks up unaided SPL from the speaker. It ensures the speaker sound is delivered at some predetermined level. It serves the same purpose as the hearing aid test box reference mic in an ANSI test chamber. The very same purpose. And if you go back to your ANSI and you look in the PowerPoint slide that lays out the components inside of an ANSI test box, you'll see two mics. One mic is the mic that is attached to the 2cc coupler. That's like the probe mic, okay? That's what's measuring what's coming out of the hearing aid. The other mic is called a monitor mic, and it makes sure that the sound coming from the speakers is behaving itself, is doing what you said. It makes sure that the input into the hearing aid mic is what you stipulated. So that's why you calibrate an ANSI test box in the morning too, to ensure a flat frequency response. And you calibrate a real ear system in the morning to get rid of the effects of the tube in the ear canal. So there's parallels with ANSI testing and real ear measurement testing. ANSI testing, monitor mic. Real ear testing, reference mic. ANSI testing, mic on the 2cc coupler. Real ear testing, probe tube in the ear, that mic. So it's really, and calibration, ANSI, to ensure that the frequency response of the speaker is being flat. Calibration with real ear to get rid of the effects of the tube inside the ear canal. All right. In real ear, actually, the reference mic is king. The probe mic is secondary. And the reference mic is the one that's carefully calibrated by the real ear measurement manufacturer. The speaker should be about a half a meter from the client, and it should be at even height and straight on. It shouldn't really be from the sides. A lot of people do it from the side. It's best to have it straight on and make sure that it's not aimed at the person's stomach, and make sure that it's not aimed over the guy's head. And also, try to ensure that there's not a wall right behind the person. You're going to get reverberation and problems that way. You should have at least a yard of space around the person while he or she is sitting in the chair. The stimuli in old real ear systems, it was called sweep tones. We don't use them anymore, but sweep tones were 1/3 octave bands of tones or noise from 125 through 8,000 hertz. And what was the intensity? 55 dBSPL. Why 55? To keep it above ambient room noise. Why not any louder? Because when you're aiding, if the input is 55, that's a relatively soft input, and with linear hearing aids, then the output wouldn't be too much, wouldn't be discomfortable to the person. So they chose a soft input level of 55 just because. I see a hand pop up here. Hey.
Do we still use that sweeping tone to measure the MPO?
Not really. Almost never. I don't see it anymore. That's why it's an earmark of old real ear.
Okay. And
it was used on the old, like the RM500, that little black suitcase real ear system. You know, the old, when hearing aids were still analog. And what we use now is ISTS. It's that weird speech. It almost sounds like 6 foreign languages coming out at the same time.
That's it.
And that's usually what's used. Now, the audio scan, which is the system out of Canada, they use the carrot passage. Mm-hmm. Carrots are a long vegetable grown in the spring. Blah, 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 blah. I used to have it memorized, but
yeah.
Anyway, but a lot of people use the ISTS or whatever, which is out of Europe, the commonly used thing, and it's meant to imitate speech. That's what it's meant to do. Now, sometimes for a game, people like to use the spouse's voice. I think, well, it's a nice warm thing to do, but problem is it's not calibrated. I mean, it's going to be different, but it's kind of fun. You know, it's still, you can show what parts of the spouse's voice the person could hear without the hearing aids, and then with the hearing aids compare and see how much more. And the guy will say, well, it depends on how much I want to listen, but you know, all that stuff. That's what they always do. So, many times they've used composite band pink noise, speech-like stimuli, ISTS, live speech from spouse, but basically real ear measurement itself. The client is seated directly in front. Sound field is calibrated with the person sitting less than a meter away from the speaker. The client should be around 0 degrees azimuth, right in front, not at an angle. Avoid hard reflective walls near the system. And how far do you insert the tube? Well, we all know that the end of the tube should be about 1/4 of an inch from the eardrum. Okay, basically. And that's why the little ring, and that's why the black box is usually 29 to 30 millimeters in length. And the black box has its purpose being exactly that length, so that when you lay the tube along the whole black box, wonder if I've got a picture of that or not. I probably don't, knowing my luck. But here's that. Oh yeah, see the length of the box, and then so the tube would be laid over top of the box. If the tip of the tube is here, you'd want to place the ring right here. That way you knew that when you were putting the thing in the guy's ear, that when the ring was at the tragus, you then know that from the tragus, 29 millimeters inward will leave the tip of the tube about 1/4 of an inch from the drum. And that essentially is the purpose of all of that stuff. So the length of the mic assembly box is it's done, whether it's done in Costco systems or God knows what. You know, I'm seeing if I can borrow a set of Adro hearing aids, the ones that are fit by HLT at Sam's Clubs. I'm talking with the guy, Henry Smith, who runs the place, and we're trying to arrange that he sends a pair down to the MHS conference so that I can wear them and walk around with them and actually listen to those hearing aids, because those hearing aids are linear. They're on that linear sliding scale. They either provide more or less linear gain, and I'm just dying to know what those things actually sound like. So I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but I just did. Anyway, so all in the name of wasting time, don't you know? All right. Sometimes people have inserted the probe tube through the vent of a hearing aid. But this is not advisable as venting effects get obscured. But you have to admit it's kind of nice and easy. So, you know, if you slide it through the vent of the hearing aid, that helps to hold it in place. I've been tempted to do it, but it's not advised because you're going to obscure the effects of the vent itself. So anyway. All right. The trickiest part in real ear measurement is putting the tube in place. That's the hardest part. And a visual way is to look in with an otoscope and see that it's done right. And the other way is to make sure that the black ring is at the tragus, and if you've done that, you're okay. But always, always, always look in the ear with an otoscope before you put anything inside someone's ear. Because if you don't, and I've done this before, sliding the tube in and you thunk, you hit something, and you know you're not in very far, and you pull out the tube and you got a big clunk of yellow wax stuck on the end of the dang thing, and it's kind of like, well, that was dumb. That tube is toast. You know, do you want to look in and maybe the guy should get his ears cleared before you even dream of doing real ear? Or maybe if I look in, I can kind of go around a bit of the wax, and that's not so bad either, as long as you can, but it always helps to look in the ear first. Never hurts. Typical ambient room noise is about 35 to 40 dBSPL. So input sound from the probe mic system's got to be at least this or more. The levels used in real ear, and Gus Mueller told me yesterday, 55, 65, and 75 are actually the best ones to use. Not even 80. 50 you can, and 80 you can, but he suggests 55, 65, and 75. Those are really the three proper levels to use, because compression gives different gain for different inputs, and so therefore you've got to do real ear for 3 different targets, of course. And that's what new fitting methods do, is they're addressing compression. First you do the 65, because that's average speech intensity, 65 dBSPL. Then you do soft, then you do loud. But you should do each and every one of them, but for the first one, of course, is average 65. Now, when old real ear was kicking around big time, and the stimulus putting into the ear was always going to be around 55, and I can't figure out where I have that anymore, but as I mentioned, 55, because it was over ambient room noise, they didn't care, because linear hearing aids give the same gain at all inputs. So the gain you're getting for a 55 dBSPL input, which is just above ambient room noise, is the same gain you're going to get for 65 dB input. So you didn't really care. But today's hearing aids are using compression, and so you do care. And you want more than half gain or more than the fitting target for 55 dB SPL inputs. You want target outputs and gain for 65, and you want less than target outputs, of course, for 75. So that only is common sense. There's lots of systems out there. Okay, but it is really important to internalize that. When you're looking at 3 different inputs, the input that really is meant to match the NAL2 targets or DSL5 targets is the average speech input. You want the outputs for average speech input to match the target of the fitting method. But the fitting method, if it's smart, usually has 3 targets. And it'll have a target for 55, a target for 65, and likely a target for 75. These are not always immediately visible when you're doing real ear. On some systems, you'll have to deliberately highlight that so you can see it. But the default one usually is 65. What system are you using, Sam? What's the name of your system that you use?
We use AudioScan.
You do, yeah.
Yep.
Which one do you use, the Axiom or the VeriFit? Or
It's the VeriFit. We just barely got it, so it's one of those. It's the new system that they did, I think, 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, nice one.
Yeah,
that's a nice one.
Yeah.
At Douglas College in here in BC, we just use the Axiom, little guy, and we just hook it up to the computer monitor in front of us. I find it an easy teaching tool too, because I can hook it up to the projector and show on the screen. So
Nice.
it's kind of nice that way, but I find it a lot easier than the Oracle system, AURICAL, Oracle system. You know, the thing with the big, I don't know, curved, look like Darth Vader.
I saw my first one at OTC when I was up there last night.
Oh yeah.
So yep.
I find the audiometer works good on that system and the hearing instrument test box, but I find the real ear really complicated. It's like, oh man, it's got too many choices. There's just, I don't know. That's why I drive a Standard. It's simple. It's just.
There you go. There you go.
Oh God. Anyway, so lots of different systems. Fry, Siemens, Unity, used by Costco, although I think Costco has now gone to the Oracle system. GN Resound, Metarex, there's all kinds. And is one really better than the other? It's really not fair to say. It's just they're all just like, is any one hearing aid company better than the other ones? Well, they all make good hearing aids, really. I mean, it's not really that you can. But REM is done to verify fittings. Fitting methods predict, software predicts, real ear measurement proves. So the Canadian one is Etymotic, happens to be located in a weird town called Dorchester. The ancient old RM500 was a black, small suitcase-like box. No longer is made. Some clinics still use it, but that's if they're 150 years old. Okay, that old system only had half gain, Burger, Pogo, NAL, and Libby methods. Then they added DSL. VeriFit came out several years ago, of course, a much larger unit, much newer, costs well over 10 grand, has all the capacities of everything. It'll even start your car and make you coffee in the morning. So those kind of things. That basically, calibrating the system is done first thing in the morning, at the beginning of your work day. Sometimes you can choose to have it calibrated every week. You can choose to have it hold its calibration for a week. I don't know if there's any advantage or disadvantage, except that a daily calibration is a bit of a pain in the arse. So sometimes you can have it hold its calibration, but remember the reason you're doing calibration in the first place. It's done to remove the effect of the probe tube itself, and this is why calibration requires you to put the probe tube right against the reference mic, hold that right where the client's face is going to be, 18 inches away from the speaker, run the system, and then look to see that you got the right result. Your equipment will tell you what's a pass and what's a fail. It also ensures that the input signal delivered to the aided or unaided ear is properly controlled so that the input signal is of known levels across the frequency spectrum. The probe tubes themselves measure the actual SPL at the tympanic membrane. And so the probe tube placement is extremely important. Now there's a picture here I want to show, and we did last time, but by gum we'll do it again. And it's this picture here. When you're looking here, this is showing you the effect of probe tube placement. The horizontal axis indicates the distance of the end of the tube from the eardrum. 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3, which is an inch, okay? And what do you lose? This vertical axis shows as the decibel loss as the probe is moved further from the tympanic membrane. Note that as the distance is increased, the effect on the highs is most pronounced. There's hardly any loss for 1,000 hertz. Look at this. Almost nothing happens for 1,000 hertz. When you're looking at 8,000 hertz, you move that tube any distance away from the drum and you've lost it. So where does REM end? Or where does REUR end? Around 4,000 hertz. Around 4,000 hertz. So as that tip is moved further and further away from the tympanic membrane, this will start to drop here. And will start to drop here. I have had calls when I worked at Unitron Hearing Aids in the earlier days of Real Ear. And the guy was saying, oh, your hearing aids suck, I'm getting a terrible blah, blah. I would say, send me a copy of your Real Ear of what you've done. And I would look and I'd see the REUR dropping off past 2K, and I'd say, well, how far did you put the tube in? In a weird way, this REUR, real ear unaided response, it's like a calibration. If you've got a good REUR, you know the tube is in the canal, just as if you had the black the ring at the tragus. When you know that's there, you know the end is close to the eardrum. If you see this, you know the end is close to the eardrum. I'll tell you why. See these glasses? Without these, I'm just about blind for close-up. One day at Douglas College, I was showing students how to do Real Ear. Now, this is not long ago. It's about a month ago. Okay, now, class, what you do is you hang the thing around the ear. And I don't have my glasses on, okay? And I'm putting the probe tube in the guy's ear, and I'm making sure the black ring is at the tragus, and I'm doing REUR to show them the old Real Ear, and the REUR looks terrible. It looks like this. This is dropped right here. It just goes, yeah. And I said to the student, wow, you've got kind of an interesting ear canal. And then someone said, I don't know if the tube is stuck in there very far. Sure enough, or I should say, no shit, Sherlock, the tube was bent like this. It was stuck on something in the guy's ear canal. And sure, I may have had the ring at the tragus. The whole tube was bunched up in the guy's ear. No wonder. And that's what I'm trying to say. The end of the tip of the tube. You can look at REUR as a visual calibration to test whether your tube is put in okay. So you got 3 things to ensure that the tube is properly placed. One is look in the ear with an otoscope. The other one is use the black ring, but don't pull a TED. And the third one is if you see a good REUR, you know you're pretty close. Okay, and that's the point of this slide in this PowerPoint here, showing you the effects of the distance, of increased distance. Okay, that was the purpose of showing you that slide. All right, now what else can I lie to you? Oh yeah, right here, hang on. Okay, probe tube is further from the TM, high frequencies will be lost. So check out that PowerPoint slide. Anybody watching this particular Zoom session, put a star by this and say, please check out the PowerPoint slide that deals with it. The probe tube should always extend at least 5 millimeters past the end of a BTE ear mold or the receiver end of an ITE or past the dome. Now again, millimeters, centimeters, talking to Americans who are still using imperial, this is a centimeter. A millimeter is 1/10 of a fingernail. So essentially, make sure the tube is stuck, that far past at least. That's one way of doing it. You can always do the bump and pull method too. Thunk, did that hurt? Oh, did that hurt? All right. I'm sorry. All right. Probe tubes themselves are disposable, but they are expensive. They used to be about $1 a piece. Okay. People are advised to use once and throw away. Some clinicians attempt to reuse. They wash them with their tympanometry tips. I've seen it done 1,000 times. Water often remains in the tube, blocking or altering sound transmission. Also, the cleaning solution does not remove cerumen completely. It simply spreads the earwax along inside the tubes. This residual wax eventually gets into the red sleeve of the tube that connects to the base of the probe mic. If you're thinking I'm talking in Chinese here, what I am talking about is basically this picture right here, and in different systems, it's in different places. But on the Verifit system, the red, it may look red like this. On other systems, it might be blue. Who cares? But this is where the probe mic is. This is just the tube extending from the probe mic. You'll want to make sure wax does not get inside that probe mic. All right. So, method of tube insertion, the average ear canal. I would advise those who are not doing real ear on a regular basis to read this carefully. This is the average length of the adult ear canal, and this is why the black box has its length. 30 centimeters, I should say 30 millimeters or 29 millimeters. Look what this says. From the tragus to the TM is about 35 millimeters in length. So if the black box is 29 to 30, that means that when the ring is placed 29 to 30 millimeters from the end, the tip of the tube will be 5 millimeters from the TM, because the length of the tragus to the TM is about 35. All right. Your terms. Make sure everybody knows exactly what these terms are for old real ear. Real ear unaided response. This is where we learned about REURs. We learned about them from doing real ear. We really didn't know much about the outer ear canal resonance. We just didn't know much about this fella here. We learned about it by doing old real ear. Okay? That's where we first began. Unaided ear canal response. Open unaided ear canal. Do it about 55 dB SPL to exceed ambient room noise exceed. Good English there, Ted. All right. Then real ear aided response. Then real ear insertion gain, which is the difference. Aided response is exactly like unaided response, only the hearing aid is put into the ear, the tube is held in place exactly where it was. This is the tricky one. You want to insert the hearing aid without changing the placement of the tube. Sometimes you need 3 pairs of hands to do it. It takes a bit of manual dexterity. It takes practice. You've got to look carefully and practice and practice and practice. You will not find yourself doing this very well at first. It takes practice, believe me. That's what labs are for. That's what clinical placements are for. When you see something called in situ, that's Latin for in situation. Sometimes it's referred to as the with hearing aid in place response, hearing aid in situation response. All right, the input signal. When you're doing REAR, and this is another classic mistake, when you're doing our real ear aided response, Your input signal has to be exactly the same as when you're doing real ear unaided. Otherwise, you're comparing apples to oranges. So if you used 55 dB SPL coming into the hearing aid, doing REUR, you got to use 55 across the frequencies when you're doing real ear aided. The difference between the two was called real ear insertion gain. Real ear insertion gain. So now let's look at the picture. And please believe me, we don't do this anymore. But if you don't learn your history, you're going to be condemned to repeat it. I've heard a wise person say that before. That's why you're looking at this. We don't do this anymore, but this is the way real ear began. Real ear unaided response. Real ear aided response. The computer automatically calculates the differences between these two curves and plots it as real ear insertion gain. Nicely at the bottom of the screen. Here's your target for whatever fitting method you were using. Why was there only one target? Because the hearing aids were linear and they gave the same gain at all inputs. What was the input here? Well, if you look at this, it was 55. Notice where my cursor is. It was 55. Where did my real ear unaided response begin to rise? At around 1500. And it peaked at what? 2700 hertz. And it went out past 4000 hertz and then dropped. An aided response. So you could tell that this hearing aid was programmed to give no gain in the very low frequencies, because aided response with 55 dB coming in was 55 coming out. Both of these two, whenever you see on real ear equipment, whenever the initial ends in R, and this is the sign language for R, okay? Whenever it lands, if the last initial of the acronym is R, it always means response, and it always means output SPL. Always. REAR, output dB SPL. REUR, output dB SPL. If the acronym ends in G, it's gain. dB, simple dB. And recall the difference between dB SPL and dB. One's an absolute value, the other one's a relative value. Gain is yesterday's news. People aren't using gain anymore. So, real ear changed into speech mapping. Speech mapping doesn't care about gain at all. It only shows outputs. It shows 3 different REARs. One REAR for average inputs, one REAR for soft inputs, and another REAR for loud inputs. You're not using REUR at all. And last week, we talked about why. 2 reasons why. One reason was because REUR isn't used in the hearing test, because when you plug up a guy's ear with a headphone, you no longer have a quarter wave resonator. You no longer have a tube closed at one end. Now you've closed it at both ends. So if you didn't use the REUR in your hearing test, why in the Sam Hill are you using it in your hearing aid test? Plus, this is a terrible counseling tool. This doesn't tell anything about anything to a client who wants to know. So without beating that dead horse, because you've heard that crap before, let's get to the end of our talk today, and let's look at REOR, real ear occluded response. REOR is kind of interesting. You work your way down to that one. Let's look at it. Real ear occluded response. That's the last of the 4 acronyms in yesterday's real ear. So REOR was when you left the hearing aid in place and you turned it off. The volume's off, or you just program the hearing aid to be, or you just remove the battery. Okay, the hearing aid's dead. How much is the hearing aid acting like a plug? Why would anybody care about doing real ear occluded response? They wanted to know if the vent was working. What's the venting effects? If there's a large vent, the real ear occluded response should look just like the REUR. If the vent is tiny, then the hearing aid is plugging up the ear, and real ear occluded response should sit below the REUR. Okay? That's why it existed. That's why they did it. Real ear occluded response, output SPL at each frequency measured in the hearing aid, in the ear canal with the hearing aid in place and turned off. It's basically REAR with the hearing aid turned off. The real ear occluded gain, which people don't really look at anymore, would be the gain at each frequency with the hearing aid in place. So, but really, basically, you're looking at this, real ear aided response with the hearing aid off. So this blue turns into here. And the blue, if it drops down to here with the hearing aid off, then you know there's a real wide vent and that the vent is really doing what you wanted it to do. Okay, we're just about at the end. I can almost just about taste it that we're about done. That beer is looking better. No, I'm just kidding. Let's just have a look at at what we've got here. We've still got a couple pages to go, but not that we need to look at it all. You now know what REUR, REAR, REIG, real ear occluded response again. A note about early real ear measurement that used insertion gain. Most older prescriptive fitting methods like NOW-R compare REIG to their gain targets to determine if the hearing aid is doing what it should. The closer REIG is to target gain, the better. And here's your explanations, written now instead of Ted just talking about it. DSL took a dim view of insertion gain because the targets provided by the older fitting methods are based on thresholds, and hearing thresholds are obtained with circumoral or insert headphones. One of the whole underpinnings of the DSL fitting method is that real ear unaided response is bypassed when testing with headphones. Therefore, the gain targets proposed by most hearing aid fitting methods are based on threshold measures that did not incorporate the individual's unaided response in the first place. If you are going to use real ear insertion gain, which depends on REUR, because REIG is REAR minus REUR, so if you insist on using real ear insertion gain, which uses REUR, then it would stand to reason that your unaided thresholds should have been obtained in a sound field. Because in a sound field, you're not using headphones. And if you're not using headphones, okay, then go ahead. An additional problem with REIG is that they all assumed linear hearing aids, which give the same gain for all inputs, and that's why the targets that's why there was only one target. More on this next week, or I should say in a couple of weeks when we reconvene. The rest of this stuff is just troubleshooting stuff for you to look at, a summary procedure as to what the steps taken in doing old real ear. Please highlight OLD. We don't do this anymore. The only things that are done today are 1 through 7. The rest, so 1 through 7 we still do today. 8 through 11 is yesterday's real ear. We will continue in 2 weeks from now. We will talk about today's real ear and focus more on that. As for me, I'll take out my throat and put it on a plate somewhere and gargle with some whiskey. All righty. See when I look at you. See you at MHS if you're there. Looking forward to it. It's going to be an insane flight. I get to go through Dallas. Yeehaw! All right, I'll stop recording now.